think at some point, there will be a new chair of the SEC, and I think that'll be a good thing for the American people.
There were a couple of interesting things after that Bitcoin ETF was approved in that statement. One, and I paraphrase here, was effectively Gary Gensler saying, just because we allowed the Bitcoin ETF, don't think we're now going to allow a bunch of other crypto assets. The second interesting thing was the price of Ether skyrocketed immediately after, on hopes that there could now next be an ETH ETF. What are the chances of that?
I think it's a certainty.
This year?
I'm not going to put a horizon on the time, but I think there will be other ETFs for sure.
An XRP one?
There will be other ETFs for sure.
but an XRP one?
I love this game we play. Look, I am very
That's the last time I lost.
That's fine. But look, the sad part of that reality is we have a Bitcoin ETF only because a U.S. court said to the SEC, you're being arbitrary and capricious in your application of the law. What would be sad is if every ETF had to go through that same journey and for Gary Gensler to get smacked down by the U.S. court system again.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, what do we have here? We have Ripple completely flexing their muscles. We have Brad Garlinghouse with an aggressive tone towards the SEC. And every time Brad Garlinghouse discusses all these questions in the mainstream and all these interviewers ask him questions, they treat him in the same breath of the highest level CEOs in the world. And I think Brad's name will be amongst the greatest. He will be amongst the Elon Musks and Jeff Bezoses of the world when everything is said and done. And that video about the potential XRP ETF launch just speaks volumes. These are now the questions being highlighted in the highest levels of the mainstream. XRP is among the Bitcoin and Ethereum as far as digital assets in the world are concerned. And what I have to stress to every single one of you is this. You are currently witnessing a brand new financial system coming through the birth canal, as it is spearheaded with Ripple and XRP. And I can't stress how much of a beatdown Ripple gave to the SEC, because this is why the Bitcoin ETF got approved. The maxis will never give Ripple credit, but their ETF was passed from a flustered Gary Gensler. He can't completely just disrupt this entire ecosystem like he'd want, because he's been weakened so thoroughly. And yet again today, the crypto space got a massive victory against Gary, as the SEC said themselves in court that the tokens in the Coinbase case that are being accused are not themselves securities. Ripple paved the way for this, and the entire crypto industry needs to be grateful. And here, from Cypress the Manicure, who I highly recommend you follow, as he's been putting out some great content, he shows a clip of the Accenture CEO. And remember, Accenture is a major Ripple partner. And the reason I'm showing you this is because we consistently see Ripple in the highest levels collaborating with the most powerful people, and they're all using the same language. A lot of people hate it when content creators use the phrases flip of the switch moment, but it's not our language, my friends. It is theirs. In 2023, we saw ISO go live, FedNow go live, ISO updates take place. I reported each and every single one of those events live on this channel in March. In July, we beat the SEC in July as well, and then November. And here we are, moments before the halving, moments before the complete completion of the XRP case, in the middle of Davos 2024, witnessing the birthing of a brand new system. Ladies and gentlemen, get your ducks in a row. We are about to become the new 1%.
So, do y'all remember this flip the switch narrative that a whole bunch of influencers were throwing around? Well, we're not making this stuff up, people. The switch has been flipped. Okay, listen. Remember, we've been talking about how those that adapt and migrate over to this new digital transformation way of doing things and actually adopt artificial intelligence and this digital transformation will be the ones that benefit. Okay, this is the freaking CEO of Accenture. Listen to what she says at Davos. Okay, this is the information that's being pumped out, but nobody's paying attention to this stuff. Pay attention to what they say.
In order to not be afraid, you have to know more about this technology than you've ever had to know about technology, because you didn't have responsible PC, you didn't have responsible cloud. And in 3 decades, I've never stood in front of a client and been able to say, this technology will change everything about your business positively if you do it right.
I mean, think if you're a CEO, and I remember the day we started talking about ChatGPT. It was like you would flip the switch, and like these CEOs, the day before, never said AI or it was something off in the future. Suddenly, it's here and now, and you better be up to speed, or you're going to lose. Right?
Yeah.
You better be up to speed, or you're going to lose. Pay attention to detail as to what's going on, people. We've been trying to show you all the devil's in the details.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, as the XRP army continues to flex their muscles to the finish line, and as we wait for our moon mission moment, our flip of the switch moment, and our celebration, here I'm going to leave you with a full CNBC interview with the Ripple CEO Brad Garlinghouse at Davos, as he was on full display for the world to see. Here, Brad Garlinghouse breaks a lot of things down. And I want all of you to look at him speak as a winner. The body language is telling. He knows it's almost showtime. And I need to stress to everyone in the XRP army, we're about to have our time in short order. 2024 is our year. And only the strong will make it. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Bearable Bull here. Thanks for tuning in. As always, I appreciate every single one of you. Now I'll be back tomorrow with another video.
SEC or the chair, Gary Gensler, changed their tone even after the approval of the Bitcoin ETF. There was a statement. Gary Gensler said he didn't endorse Bitcoin. He still called most other crypto assets securities. Is this posturing, or do you think there's a chance the SEC has changed its stance?
There's an expression about, one of the definitions of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and not expecting a different outcome. I think Gary Gensler is doing the same thing over and over again, and it thinks that somehow he's going to win in court. He has continued to lose in court. I do think the chair of the SEC, Gary Gensler, has become a political liability in the United States. And I think he's not acting in the best interest of the citizenry. He's not acting in the best interest of the long-term growth of the economy. And I don't understand it. And I think at some point, there will be a new chair of the SEC, and I think that'll be a good thing for the American people.
There were a couple of interesting things after that Bitcoin ETF was approved in that statement. One, and I paraphrase here, was effectively Gary Gensler saying, just because we allowed the Bitcoin ETF, don't think we're now going to allow a bunch of other crypto assets. The second interesting thing was the price of Ether skyrocketed immediately after, on hopes that there could now next be an ETH ETF. What are the chances of that?
I think it's a certainty.
This year?
I'm not going to put a horizon of the time, but I think there will be other ETFs for sure.
An XRP one?
There will be other ETFs for sure.
but an XRP one?
I love this game we play. Look, I am very
That's the last time I lost.
That's fine. But look, the sad part of that reality is we have a Bitcoin ETF only because a U.S. court said to the SEC, you're being arbitrary and capricious in your application of the law. What would be sad is if every ETF had to go through that same journey and for Gary Gensler to get smacked down by the U.S. court system again. It might be necessary But again, at some point, I think Gary Gensler won't be the chair of the SEC, and that will be a good thing for the American people.
There's what the SEC does, and then there's what is going on in Washington amongst lawmakers. And those are linked but also separate. Now, the US hasn't passed any kind of comprehensive regulation around crypto assets at this point, unlike you see in the European Union with MiCA and some of the other jurisdictions you mentioned earlier as well, Dubai. But there are a number of bills trying to make their way through the lawmaking process. One of those is around stablecoins. There's a number of others as well. Do you think that in 2024 there is the political will, given it's an election year as well, to pass some of these bills and bring them into law?
I said earlier I don't like to predict things based on time, and this one I will. I think this year there will be legislation that passes. I won't be as predictive about which one. I think likelihood is that the stablecoin, clarity for stablecoin. I can't remember the name of the bill that has been going through the system in Washington D.C. But I think we will see that in part because the U.S. Treasury wants it. Right. I mean, I think the stablecoin market has really surprised people in some ways in terms of solving a real need. And I think it only makes sense for there to be regulatory clarity around that. I think that's good for the whole industry. And, one of the things you said earlier is, are there skeletons in the closet? The stablecoin market, because there hasn't been clear rules of the road, it'll be interesting as that comes to fruition. The two primary, obviously USDT and USDC, I think they are, here to stay, and I think you're going to see other entrants in that market too. You said before that the U.S. risks losing some of the leadership around this industry, that other countries have taken a lead, and a lot of that is due to what the SEC does and the fact there isn't clear regulation in the U.S. If the regulation does pass this year, if there's clearer rules for the road for the broader industry, does that help? Will the U.S. be able to compete with some of these other jurisdictions who took an early lead in this industry? For sure, yes. I don't think the market has passed to the U.S. I think it has passing. And you are seeing, look, we have publicly shared over 70% of Ripple's hiring last year was non-U.S., despite the fact that there's still a majority of our employees in the United States. Why would we want to hire in a market where we have a hostile government? We have a government who won't provide the clarity we have asked for, where we had to fight for years and spend well over $100 million in the court system to fight them. So, there will continue to be a lot of activity, I think, in London, in Dubai, in Singapore, in some of the other, financial capitals of the world. But I think the U.S. eventually figures it out. I don't know how to predict what's going to happen in the election cycle, but no matter what, there's going to be, a shift, if you will. And I think we will see a shift at the SEC, hopefully to a new chair that is constructive and wants to work with the industry and not put their own agenda ahead of the American people's.
I've been asking you this since 2020 because that's how long it's been going on for. Ripple versus the SEC lawsuit. When do we get a conclusion?
Look, but most of it has been resolved, right? So the SEC filed a lawsuit in December of 2020, so just over 3 years ago, against me, against Chris Larson, and against Ripple. The case against Chris and Brad, myself, have been dismissed entirely with prejudice, meaning they can't ever bring it back. And the case against Ripple, they lost on everything they cared about. Their primary tenet was that XRP is a security. And in the Judge Torres's opinion, what she wrote is, XRP is, in and of itself, not a security. So I feel very good about that. The SEC then asked for approval to appeal that decision, and that was denied. So, look, the SEC has lost consistently in this case. There is a piece of the case that continues around institutional sales, because investment contracts, where Ripple sold XRP to institutions who wanted to speculate. The irony there is, again, the SEC's one of their missions is to protect investors. How many of our institutional XRP sales did they lose money? None. So, what are we arguing about? Anyway, so look, that will proceed through the court system for a little bit longer, but I feel very good about where we are, and I frankly really pleased for the whole XRP ecosystem, and the whole crypto market benefited immensely from that legal win.
Just for the last 5 minutes, Brad, let's talk about Ripple, what your focus is this year, where you're going, and the future. For 2024, where are you putting your energy?
Well, a couple things come to mind there. Obviously, our core product around Ripple Payments has continued to grow. And that's something we'll continue to invest in, more payout markets around the world. We, through an acquisition, entered the custody market in 2023. Certainly a lot of our investment, our incremental new investment in 2024 will be investing in the custody business.
Is that in anticipation of sort of some of these bigger investors getting into the markets and?
Well, I mean, on one hand, I would say yes. However, there's already a tremendous amount of demand. I mean, that business is growing very quickly. We announced publicly just a month or two ago that HSBC is a new client of that business. So, you know, these are big accounts as well as more mid-market accounts. The custody business is very real and is going to continue to grow nicely. You know, I do think Ripple thinks about entering other vertical markets, so payments, custody. I think we'll do other things in 2024. Some of those will probably enter through acquisition. We've been super fortunate to have a very strong balance sheet at a time that you know, the market has shifted and the valuations of a lot of these companies is not what it once was. That's been an opportunity for us, and so we're going to continue to play offense.
And what are the areas that interest you then?
I was thinking about being your wardrobe consultant. No, I'm not going to announce the world, you know, the key areas. But look, Ripple at its core is a blockchain infrastructure company serving enterprises. We started with payments and financial institutions. We've moved into custody, a lot of overlap with those same financial institutions. But we're going to expand with that same thematic of infrastructure, enterprise-based, that's served us well.
And what are your growth expectations this year? What revenue growth are you tracking this year? Will you be profitable this year?
So, you know, we have been cash flow positive the last couple of years. You know, that has been a unique place in the market and allowed us to invest not only in the core of Ripple, but also in acquisitions. And even, you know, recently you may have read we did a tender offer to our shareholders. Yeah. We've now repurchased over $1 billion of stock from our shareholders. That's something that's important to us, quite frankly, because it is not an immediate term priority to go public. You know, in the United States, trying to go public with a very hostile regulator that has to approve your S1, that doesn't sound like a lot of fun to me. You know, Coinbase obviously had their S1 approved, and now the SEC is suing them for doing things that was outlined in their S1. Now, that, as I mentioned, there's a hearing tomorrow in the U.S. about some of that, but I think it's indicative of why would we want to subject ourselves to an SEC that is openly hostile to this industry?
So in terms of an IPO, an exit of some sort, is that sort of parked to the side at this point?
Yeah, I mean,
or are you looking elsewhere, outside the U.S. for a listing?
I mean, yes to all of those. Okay. I don't think about an IPO as an exit. I think about an IPO as a step in the journey. You know, shareholder liquidity is important to me. We have investors that first invested in Ripple in 2012. So they've been in this deal for, you know, 11 and a half years. And so we want to provide that liquidity, which is one of the reasons why we've done these tender offers and now repurchased over $1 billion of stock. You know, we have looked at other jurisdictions that have clearer rules of the road. But honestly, a lot of people go public because they need to raise capital.
Yeah.
Ripple's not really in a place where we need to raise capital. And so it is not a short-term priority. We're obviously keeping that option open, and we'll evaluate it, you know, as time continues. And we'll evaluate it again as we have new regulators sitting at the United States SEC.
And I guess some of it's market dependent as well. Last year was an interesting, you know, space with in the tech world more broadly. There were a lot of secondaries, buybacks, but very few IPOs. The market wasn't obviously very great for them. So I guess it's also, you know, how the broader markets play out as well.
For sure, that's part of it. And you know, not just the public markets, but also the crypto markets. Yeah. And, you know, I think Coinbase's stock is in a much stronger position now than it was a year ago, but obviously well off its highs from 3 years ago when it went public. So it's just not a huge priority. We have a lot of capital, very strong balance sheet. We can continue to play offense through an acquisition point of view, invest in the business. You know, as we started this conversation, I am very optimistic about the crypto market in 2024 because of those things around putting compliance first.
Right.
Making sure we focused on solving real problems for customers and not just the speculative cycle, I think will put the whole industry in a really good trajectory.
How do you think the retail investor feels? Because you know, we know in previous cycles, more broadly, you know, you get the initial bump up, sort of at the phase we're in now. And what takes it really to those all-time highs is the fever amongst the retail investors. Now, the last cycle was special. It was a very different crypto winter to one that we had seen before, characterized by a lot of bankruptcies, a lot of contagion, and then obviously the issues with FTX and Binance as well. Do you think the retail investor at this point may be a little bit more cautious this time around, this cycle, about dipping the toe back in?
I think probably yes, but you know, look, one of the, I think, advantages is I've been around the block once or twice. I remember the earliest days of the internet as we know it, and you know, the retail investor really drove the hype cycle of Internet 1.0, and I'm talking about 1999, 2000, and then you had a washout in 2001, 2002, and that was a painful, you know, the dot-com crash. But today, when we sit here, some of the most valuable companies on the planet in Alphabet, Meta, you know, these are companies that were born of that era. And so I think that what happens in the short term around crypto is, you know, I take a very long view, and I encourage, whether you're a retail investor or an institutional investor, I think if you take a long-term view about where these markets are going and why there's so much momentum despite the self-inflicted wounds. I mean, again, as you and I talked backstage, Bitcoin's not that far from its all-time high right now.
Yeah.
And I'm very optimistic about what we're going to see this year.
Brad, just as we wrap up, I was walking down the promenade yesterday, and crypto has been displaced by AI as the cool kid on the block. How do you feel about that?
I'm thrilled.
You're thrilled. Why?
Look, I think that
it's good that crypto's boring now, right?
It's I don't know if I can laugh more. Look, I think every new technology goes through a hype cycle. I think AI is also a technology here to stay, transformational in a lot of ways, but also not exactly clear what the business models are, how it's going to play out. And I think that's where crypto was a few years ago. And I think now we're further along, and I think that's a very positive thing for the crypto industry. I'm excited about what's going on in AI. I'm a voyeur, not a participant in that world, but it's going to be interesting.
Brad, always a pleasure to speak to you. That was a whirlwind tour, as always. Thank you so much for joining me today. Round of applause for Brad Garlinghouse, CEO of Ripple.